Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2, Faith. So faith is the second principle of Napoleon Hill's that we're going to cover in this episode. And he says faith, along with love and sex, are one of the most powerful human emotions. And love and faith are more sort of like psychic and related to the spiritual side of man. So his quote on faith, or his definition of faith is a state of mind which may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. So all thoughts which have been given feeling and mixed with faith will eventually translate themselves into their physical equivalent. However, this is true whether we're talking about negative or positive emotional feelings, because our subconscious mind just doesn't distinguish. Essentially, it just translates those thoughts. So we have millions believing themselves doomed to failure, over which they have no control. And of course, that's translated into reality by their subconscious mind. We create our own misfortune or our own bad luck. Better still, our own good luck. And as we discovered in the last chapter, Napoleon Hill deceived his son's subconscious mind with regards to his hearing. And faith is a state of mind which can be induced by autosuggestion. So essentially, we convince our subconscious mind that what we are thinking is actually true. So I've got a couple of quotes here. Faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. Thoughts which are mixed with any of the feelings of emotions constitute a magnetic force which attracts from the vibrations of the ether other similar or related thoughts. So essentially it can be a vicious circle. And as we again heard in the last chapter, we are powerful because we can control our thoughts. But we have to be conscious of the fact that we need to control those thoughts. Because every man is what he is because of his dominant thoughts. So the human mind attracts vibrations which harmonize. And I think we're all familiar with the concept of the tuning fork, which attracts and harmonizes with any tuning fork in its vicinity, which has the same vibrational frequency. And this really was the reason that Napoleon Hill suggested that we needed to read that statement, which we outlined in the 6 steps that we covered in the last chapter, because we can reach our subconscious mind by reading that out aloud through those vibrations. He also then gives a formula to develop our self-confidence, because that is what he says is our greatest weakness. And essentially he goes through those 6 steps and writes out a formula to increase our self-confidence. He then goes on to say that law of autosuggestion will either pull us up or put us down. Again, it goes back to the importance of our thoughts. Then goes on to a bit of a different concept with regards to power and faith. And he gives we're all familiar with Gandhi. And Gandhi created his power out of his understanding of faith. And he transplanted that faith into the minds of over 2 million people. And in fact, he influenced those 2 million minds to move in unison. And this concept is actually covered in another book called Power versus Force, which we'll probably cover on a later episode. Napoleon Hill then talks about the change in industry following the Great Depression, because this book was published, to be fair, following the Great Depression. And he suggested that the past methods of force and fear should be replaced by the better principles of faith, where employers and employees alike will take a share in the success of the business, but they need to stop bargaining by force at the expense of the public. And when we see what's going on today, and it's 2022 when I'm recording this, with all the strikes, etc., that we're still experiencing, essentially that principle hasn't been brought into realization. And the last thing he tells then is the story of United States Steel, how a single man's idea, as in Charles M. Schwab, brokered a deal to create one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America. And he achieved this by faith, with desire and imagination. And the last couple of quotes I'd like to read here are, "Riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitations." But he follows on to say, there are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought.